And I want to welcome you to our welcome you to our workshop for this year, and to introduce our guests. And so our moderator will be Dr. Ashley Beardsley. She's the assistant professor of English and director of the University Writing Center. And like I said, she'll be moderating the discussion following the presentation by our speakers. So that is Dr. Michael Lorenzen, professor at the University Libraries and coordinator of archives and special collections. And then Dr. Everett Hamner, professor of English, Quad Cities, also the liberal arts and sciences coordinator. So I will go ahead and turn it over to, so Drs. Lorenzen and Hamner will give us a brief presentation. Then we'll have the moderated questions from Ashley, and then we'll have general questions from the audience. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to them.
All right, well, I agree with Everett. I would be going first. So I'll go ahead and get started. Obviously, a lot of this presentation comes out of our work on the Faculty Senate AI Task Force. And we do intend to talk about some of our suggestions for how to incorporate this into your syllabi and how to design courses, and to some different approaches that faculty might want to take to using or forbidding AI in their courses. And we will talk about that. I stopped to maybe talk a little bit briefly about the bigger picture of AI and AI writing, and show a few things before I hand it over to Everett. And when we get more into the meat of some of the stuff in the report and some ideas that we had. Obviously, this kind of has surprised a lot of us in the last couple of years, what AI can do and how quickly it has progressed. Obviously, a lot of this was going on in the background for years we were not really aware of. But when ChatGPT hit the public awareness, people all of a sudden started realizing what it could do and how accessible it could be for everybody, including people in higher education and students. Since then, and since I first started talking about this a year and a half, 2 years ago, I'm trying to remember when I first gave my first presentation on this, it has advanced incredibly fast. If people say, well, there's no way AI will be able to do that, and 3 months later, I can show you 5 apps that do everything that we didn't think it'd be able to do. And I'm keeping up with it, and I'm still behind on a lot of what's going on. It's hard to keep up with all the advancements going on. So I am going to show just a few general tools that will let you kind of access the wider universe of AI rather than just ChatGPT. Because we're not just talking ChatGPT, we're talking a much bigger picture. And if you've heard this analogy from before, I apologize, I'm going to do it again. But this, when we're talking about AI and AI writing and AI things like AI art and AI video producers and some of the things that the AI does, there's not just one AI. There's not just ChatGPT. There are different brands. They're like different colas out there. We have Coke, we have Pepsi, we have RC Cola. We have lots of different people creating their own brands of cola. And they all are a little different and they all have different strengths, but all of them in general do the same thing. They'll write for you. They can program. A lot of them are doing all of it. You can use them now to use art and create videos, sometimes within the same AI app. And even if you don't see the name on them, other products are using these AI. They call them, the little AP keys that go out, and producers can put these into their products and use them. So when you're using Grammarly, it's actually when it's using its advanced mode, it's using ChatGPT and using AI within Grammarly. When you're using Microsoft products, including Word, that now has Copilot with it, so that when you're in PowerPoint or Word, it will suggest entire papers for you or entire slides. And in PowerPoint, it will actually, do the graphics for you and the layout and produce the text that you want. If you tell it the topic, give it an outline, and then you hit go, and then kind of edit it as you go along. So a lot of times it's not evident that you're using AI, but it's in the product. And sometimes, it is AI because you're using it directly. In our case, students aren't necessarily going to ChatGPT to write their papers and using AI. They're using AI from other third-party sources that are incorporated into other products. And it can be very confusing for them because they're going to say, well, I didn't use ChatGPT, and they didn't. They may have used something that we actually approve of them using, but it has AI on it and it produces a text. So it's very confusing. for us and for students to figure out what is appropriate, what isn't, which is why some of the things we tried to address in the task force report what about it. Probably the ones I know this is about writing. So the ones that we're most interested are the ones that do writing. So I will show a comprehensive tool called Poe, which actually gives you access to hundreds of AI at the exact same time. I can kind of show you the big universe that's there and show you how you can use some of the tools just to kind of give you an idea. So if you have used some of the AI writing, some of this look familiar, but I'm pretty sure I'll probably show you some things you haven't seen before. So if you give me control of the screen.
You should be able to go ahead and screen share.
Okay, looks like it is there. So let me. Are you seeing Poe? No.
I am
Try
not.
again. Are you seeing it now?
There we go. Yes, thank you.
All right. So this is Poe.com, and you can actually go to it and you can get some of it for free, or you can get a subscription for $19.99 a month, and it'll give you everything. And I go ahead and pay for the full version because it lets me see all the tools and lets me use the more powerful AI things that are on here. So it kind of defaults and gives us some of the basics. So I can see I got Claude 3 Opus, which is their brand new Claude AI writer. It also does some of the other things like, creating spreadsheets and statistical analysis and creating some different types of art. Chat GPT 4, so it's the newest version of ChatGPT, and it's got 128,000 tokens in it, which is a lot more than a normal search. This will actually let you basically put in a book and analyze an entire book if you wanted to. There's one of them in here that actually has 1 million tokens. It's just the amount of material you can actually upload into it to have it analyze and work with when you're writing it. Probably most of you are familiar with just the basic with, you just type in a prompt. So, write an essay on illegal drug use and colleges. And if I do something real general like that, it will give me a very crappy several paragraphs thing on it. If I want to prompt it more, I can say include organized crime, impact on grades, social issues. That's a bad prompt too, but I'm just trying to give you a quick example. And then you hit it in there and it produces a paper. These are getting better than they used to be, depending on the prompting, but the text is less AI-like and reads more like regular stuff. You may or may not be able to detect it. The AI detectors are very specific how they look for it. They're looking for frequency of words, what are the words that are going to be predicted most. They're looking at the burstiness of the words, how much word choice there is. And the people that make the AIs know that, and they're coming up with ways to make their stuff look less AI. And you got to remember, they're not making this for the college student audience to cheat or high school students to cheat. They're making this so businesses have AI that sounds realistic. They want people to be able to use this to create chat bots for their businesses. And so that when you're interacting with them online, you think you're talking to a human. They want ad copy that reads like a human, not written by an AI. So they've actually had these AI tools detecting the AI and had Google using it to detect websites. They're using that feedback to come up with the AI stuff, which is not detectable by AIs. So there is not a lot of ways to really catch AI that's guaranteed. The AI writing is better than it used to be, and it continues to get improved as it reacts to the AI detectors. At the same time, the AI has a lot of false positives, which we know. There's lots of stories in the media, horror stories, students being accused of AI and the professor failing them, and then it wound up in court. You can read about these in the Chronicle. Some students were denied graduation and then later reinstated after the professor thought everything was AI from a bunch of students that it wasn't. So you have to be careful with it. AI things are a tool to help you maybe indicate that there was AI writing, but it's not a guarantee. There's lots of reasons why you might get a false positive in the AI writing. And if a student does a couple extra steps, you will not catch it at all. There are some ways that you can learn online to kind of launder the text a little bit more through like a paraphraser, which would take away any ability for the AI to detect it. So that's just a simple fact of what we're dealing with and what's out there. Some of the new ones that come out will actually integrate citations into them. There's one that I've looked at a couple of times, Genie AI, which gets better every time I look at it, will actually generate citations to go with the text it generated, and it will also allow you to make quotes, because it will go right into Google Scholar and take quotes from the text, and then we'll cite it in the formation format that you want, and then create a citation list bibliography based on that when you're writing it. So there's lots of things you can do to make it look a little better. You can also upload information into these. So for example, right here's a little plus button. So I've actually created an assignment, AI sample assignment. I'm going to upload that. And I downloaded an article from 1990 from the Western Journal of Folklore on the truth about Bigfoot. And I'm going to have this write the assignment for me. So I'm going to please do the assignment. And the assignment asks it to analyze the article, summarize it, and give my opinions on the author and some other alternate interpretations for Bigfoot that I might have. Use the third person, use the first person. Oops. I put that in there and hit that. I'm just going to upload it. It's going to analyze the assignment and the article, and it's going to write an essay. So it reads fast. I did tell the AI to limit it to 2 pages, so it shouldn't be too long. The assignment says 2 pages max. So there's my conclusion. So I could take that and then start working with that. Cut and paste that into an editor and start writing it to make it more my own if I want to. I can also go down and use a different AI at this point. So I can compare it. So if I want to use another AI writing tools, let's say Claude 3 Opus, I hit this, and it will do it again and use a different AI writing product to do the same assignment. So there'll be some similarities, but there'll also be some differences, be some different insights that come up depending. Every time it generates, obviously they generate differently, and each product's going to generate a little differently as well. And then at the end, there'll be, well, it's going to be even more alternative explanations. Then at the end, I can go with these 2, or I can actually go down and pick another one. There's more ones I could have it compared with. So it does follow-up questions. You know, are there other things you want me to talk about? Or I can go in and use a different one and look at this again. And then at this point, I can also combine these 2 together. And it will attempt to synthesize the articles. And it may lose some stuff in the conversion into a new product. I've noticed sometimes it drops stuff, but it does a good job of combining different essays together when you do them. Obviously, when you combine different AI ones that have the different AIs work a little differently, and it really confuses the AI detectors because it can't tell if it's ChatGPT or if it's Claude or what, because it can usually tell the flavors of cola that they're getting, and when it starts mixing them, it's harder for it to tell even than that. But so we can get that. You can also upload spreadsheets and do statistical analysis. So if you upload a bunch of graphs, you can say, please analyze and give recommendations based on these business reports. And it will give you some stuff on those business reports and give you what you want. So again, I think it's important to know what students are using, and I also think it's important to think about how you might want to incorporate this into your teaching. We already know that businesses are asking students for AI skills when they graduate. We've already been told that students are being asked, what was your favorite prompt in college for doing assignments? Businesses expect students to know how to use AI. They're hiring people out of college. That's something they expect to be able to use. At the same time, we obviously have a good concern, and it's not always best for students to use AI in these assignments. So we have to figure out how we can get, the best learning experience we can out of these tools in our courses, but at the same time, make sure students are getting the tools they need to actually get jobs when they leave, because they're going to be using this AI stuff. It's important that they know how to use some of this stuff, and and hopefully they can use some of it in some of their courses on classes and gain some proficiency with AI, how it's used and how to use it appropriately and ethically in the workforce. So a little bit close to the 10 minutes I said I would do. Is Everett here and ready to hand off?
I am, sir. Sorry,
All
my
right.
link
Thank you,
was
Everett.
handy at the beginning. Hi, everybody. I am going to supplement what Mike has offered in a similar 10-minute burst here, with a hope that we can then turn into a lot of conversation, just because that tends to be the most fruitful. And what you'll probably gather from me is that, partly because of just how Mike and I tag team best, he's presented a more positive, kind of overall enthusiastic, leaning vision of where we are. And I'm going to be a little bit more, on the critical side by comparison. But the reality is that it's complicated. There is no easy answer with any of this. And my biggest takeaway, if there was nothing else to tell you, based on my experience reading in this area and experimenting and teaching now, this semester, especially on AI, is it really, really requires that we each think hard about what we consider learning to be, what we consider writing to be, what we consider creation and originality to be. And that learning about what the technology is capable of is the most crucial thing we can do, just through experimentation and digging ourselves. So if you take nothing else from me, there it is. That's my central encouragement. I was thinking of sharing some examples too of how much things have evolved. I just want to support what Mike said about just how far things have evolved, how very quickly. I've taken the same prompt in June of last year, September of last year, December, and now I can do it again today, and just watch how much better the different versions of ChatGPT or Claude, now 3, are. But rather than take the time for that, since you've seen a lot of text generation already, I want to go to our report, and I'm going to share my screen and just emphasize some key things from this. There we go. And just gloss them a little bit. So here goes. When you take a look at this, today, to me, there's a few sections that I think are really extra essential. In the definitions area, I think it's really important that people get in their head the distinction.
Hey, Everett,
Yeah.
we've got a screen that still just has your Finder open instead of the report.
Thank you. How about now?
There
Thanks.
we go.
I'm working with 2 screens. I much appreciate it.
You're good.
Okay. So I'll be kind of looking back and forth here.
Maybe make it bigger too, if you can.
See if that will succeed. How's that? Good, Tammy?
Yeah, it's fine. You can get it all on one page. It just didn't make sense to have the other.
Yep. Okay, here goes. So I want to make sure everybody's getting in our vocabulary the difference between ANI, or narrow artificial intelligence, AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, and in between them, generative AI. ANI, to go back to the beginning here of my list, is sometimes also called weak AI. It's very task specific. And we need to understand that this is here. We're integrating it into everything in our culture. And we have been doing this now for many years. And in some cases, this gets a lot of publicity, stuff like chess and Go players, and we're all hearing about crashes and insurance and suits, lawsuits with self-driving vehicles, etc. It's at the, it's integrated into so many things we use, from Netflix to our texting programs on our phones. Generative AI has begun to move us closer to AGI, or general artificial intelligence. And there is a great deal of debate about just how close we are. You will hear on one hand, the Elon Musk of the world say that we're within a year of not just something that is equivalent of to a human being in its capacities and its generalized abilities, but we're within the end of 2025, he's claiming now, to something that is superior and capable of taking over in a Terminator 2 like crazed scenario. I don't think that's particularly convincing, and I think we should look at his track record of promises to recognize some of the overreaches, but it is moving more rapidly than many people recognize. And what generative AI is doing is using machine learning and neural nets to achieve outputs that many people would not have expected this quickly. If you just look at, say, articles from within the field in 2018, we weren't expecting as much movement as has already occurred with large language models. I don't want to go into tons of depth about that, but I just want to locate you there, because we, as a society, we conflate the super intelligent Terminator 2 scenarios with the filling in the blank in our text programs very easily. And we need to keep these things distinct to really be able to understand what we're going to open the door to and what we need to be most cautious about. Getting a little smaller here for a moment so I can navigate. I want to focus on not just opportunities, but dangers. I want you to hear that on one hand, some fields, and I think medicine is a really evident leader. It seems like every week there's a couple more discoveries that are AI enabled about, say, subcategories of prostate cancer or breast cancer or some other field in which AI's capacity to look at enormous numbers that most of us, well, all of us mentally cannot get our heads around and see patterns, is resulting in really wonderful boons to our capacity to treat and care for people. There are very good things that AI enables in one form or another. And at the same time, there are real major concerns with algorithmic bias, ways in which essentially, if you put garbage in, you get garbage out. And a lot of our data training sets is polluted because it's not necessarily representing the society we want to exist, or even the society that does exist. It's representing the wealthiest and most privileged and the more homogeneous groups that dominate our society far more fully. So just as a quick example of that, and I know a couple of you will have seen this one before, but I'm going to just throw it in the chat, or sorry, into my imagery here. 1 second here as I get my screens to cooperate. There we go. And bring this over here. Are you now seeing? Well, go ahead. There we go. Seeing a Washington Post article, I hope. This is how AI generators see the world.
Yes.
Thank you. So this is from November, if I recall, but it's just one simple expose of how ChatGPT, DALL-E, the many different image generators that are out there, like other forms of generative AI, they rely on their input data. And when the vast majority of internet images that are available to them tell them that toys in Iraq should mean a soldier with a gun, that's what they're going to present to users. When asked to give images showing attractive people, it's going to show overwhelmingly young and light-skinned people. When asked, what are Muslim people? What do they look like? you're going to see men with head coverings. And that pattern plays out across a lot of different fields here. I know I'm scrolling quickly here. But it influences, it redoubles some of our biases and our expectations if we don't approach it critically. If you ask for a person at social services, you're going to see a lot of BIPOC people. You're going to see more mixed genders. And if you ask for a productive person, you're going to see overwhelmingly white, male, and also relatively young images. I could keep going, but you get the idea. Some of these are more egregious than others. Okay, so that's the problem with algorithmic bias that we really have to attend to. We're all hearing about hallucination and the ways that AI is capable of, generative AI that is capable of making up information that doesn't exist. And the reason that happens is simply that our AI is on a clock, and it gathers across billions of data points averages of output and says, all right, I have to have the next most likely word here. What is the next most likely word? And sometimes the equation yields something that doesn't exist. And so you can end up with, for instance, I had it do a works cited for a paper just out of curiosity. And out of the 6 entries that it gave me, I basically told it what the articles were, real articles that I wanted it to turn into an MLA format works cited. And I didn't give it all the info. I just told it titles, article, authors, and said, give me the full works cited. And 3 of the ones it gave me were for the correct article with correct citation, format, and data for the journal, the year, etc. And 3 of them were for journals that didn't exist, and manipulated data in order to fulfill my request quickly. So that's a problem. And if you are not sufficiently critical on what you're asking for, you're going to be in trouble. Corporate ownership is a big deal here. The fact that these data sets and these AI are largely owned by extraordinarily large and powerful corporations that don't always have the public good as their highest priority. That's an issue. And I want to share one more thing that I didn't emphasize quite as much in the report, but which only grows as a concern for me, and that is energy use. So if you look, you're probably seeing here, if I'm sharing well, AI's craving for data is matched only by runaway thirst for water and energy. That's an article in The Guardian. Sorry, trying to get the screens working here nicely for me. This is not just coming from your progressive newspapers of choice. The Wall Street Journal is acknowledging that this is a major problem, that AI is ravenous for energy. This is one of the most detailed articles from the Washington Post about how rapidly we're seeing data centers being invested in and built. For instance, I was just looking in the last week at an article explaining how coal-fired plants from West Virginia that had been fully scheduled for shutdown finally are being revived by a sudden need for new power for data centers in the Washington, D.C. area. And so new power lines are being built to accommodate that and run power from coal plants in West Virginia to the surrounding Virginia, DC area. And that's because of this exponential growth in energy hunger. If you saw articles about, say, the way that that blockchain was demanding energy use, AI is dwarfing it. And that is a major problem. We're talking small country scale usage. And acceleration. So we got to ask, what the benefits and the costs are and what we're willing to accept there. So I think I've gone probably a little more than my 10 minutes. So I'm going to stop here. Let Tammy chime in about those West Virginia coal mines in the chat, and turn it over to whoever's going next here. Maybe Ashley, you're going to lead a Q&A.
Yeah, so I will act as moderator for us. So I have, some kind of more WID related questions, as you might expect for a presentation sponsored by WID. But if you have questions, I will also monitor the chat, and we can, go ahead. You can also, unmute yourself if you would like to as well. And so since, we were just talking about kind of the usage problem here, I'll go ahead and we'll start with Tammy's question in the chat. So, comment we have here, it says, and those West Virginia coal mines use mountaintop removal, which literally destroys the mountains. At least 25% of the mountains in West Virginia are gone. So one of the things, that Everett's really emphasizing here, and statements like this show, is at what cost? It's pretty magical, as we saw at the beginning of this presentation, when Michael was showing us how quickly these tools create essays, but they have to be powered by something. So perhaps that is one ecological consideration that you might start thinking about as you play with AI, as I do, and how that impacts what's going on environmentally, and even, teaching students about that as well. To get the questions kicked off, I will give us a WID related one. And then if you all have other questions or comments, like I said, feel free. I've got the chat open for myself. So one thing that I think about from the perspective of WID, we're thinking about writing in the disciplines and how various our policies are when it comes to AI and things like that. And the task force did provide some syllabus policies and options, recommendations for helping students use Gen AI responsibly in classrooms. But since we've got some experts here, what options for syllabus policies or classwork do you all think WID instructors might use kind of as starting points to get us to incorporate some policy work into our classes, whether it is for or against using AI?
I'll let Everett go with this because it's, he does more of the writing instruction. I will say though, that this is up to every faculty and department to make their own decisions. We certainly don't think there should be a universal tool for every single class that's the same. People are going to have different needs for their classes, different learning objectives, and different ways that students are going to use writing. And sometimes it might be appropriate to use, and sometimes it's not. I think that's kind of what we had in mind. But I'll let Everett go ahead and talk some more about that and what we put in the report.
I imagine you're seeing on your screens the section of the report engaging this. Without duplicating the reading that's there for you, our recommendation was to have a university-wide language that students could recognize, that would involve calling any particular course Gen AI permitted, partially permitted, or not permitted, with different possibilities for how faculty could articulate that. We have suggested syllabus statements here, but not absolutely required by any means. And I will say for my own part that I've been using partially permitted most extensively, because I wanted to experiment with this. I wanted my students to be able to understand what's out there and navigate it, because I think, as Michael said, there's a ton of learning that can occur that way. But it's also deeply important to me to help students to understand that that real thinking and writing as a means of thinking, as a way of discovering what you think, and getting at the core of a complex idea, is not something that you can outsource. It's something that has to happen internally. It has to happen in conversation with others. And, Gen AI can be a helpful tool for some people there, even as they do their own work. They could ask it to provide a hypothetical outline to a paper that, they have a prompt for, and then ask themselves, okay, how do I want to do something that's distinct from this? But of course, one thing that I think becomes really crucial there for that to be a productive process and not just, farming it out to the AI to do for them is a lot of transparency. And so I've been very explicit in my assignment sheets and processes with students that I expect them to save all output from generative AI that they utilize and have that accessible. I haven't thus far expected them to turn it in to me, but anywhere where I had questions, I tell them you need to have it accessible. You need to have saved it either through screenshots or through the easy, copy and paste onto a Word document that the systems allow, so that you've got that record of how you were utilizing these systems, and so that you can show I was not simply having it do the work for me. I was using it as a kind of dialogue partner. There's a lot of ways that we can do that, and I'm sure that many others among you have good ideas about how to do it.
Thank you. We have a question in the chat from Amy. Amy, would you like to read it, or would you like me to read it for you? Or you can speak.
Oh, yeah, well, why not just give up? And given the way, Mike introduced things, why not just give up on expecting students to learn to summarize, analyze, and organize in writing? If these are valuable skills, though, then how can we foster their development given the ease of outsourcing the labor of writing? I've talking to a student who acknowledged using AI in sort of a chat. It's like, well, you can give those expectations of transparency, but there's no guarantee anybody will use them, right? That's also an act of trust. But if these aren't valuable skills anymore, then let's change writing the discipline to prompts in the discipline, and think about whether, what is there a place for the humanities, right? If everybody's outsourcing, or is it a niche thing to learn to read and write for those who really care about it? So a bunch of questions.
Yeah, and you're getting into some good philosophical questions. And when I'm showing AI and being positive about it while still recognizing there's problems with it, that doesn't mean I'm advocating giving up on any of that. I certainly think students need to learn to read and write and analyze and be able to do it on their own. There's certainly all kinds of issues that come with this. It's exciting to be in these times and see these AI tools and to see what they can do. And I think it's important that you're aware of what they can do and what the students can do. I think that's the basis for being able to then go ahead and continue to try to teach those skills which you think are important, including things that you're bringing forward. The fact that we don't like the fact that AI may seem to get rid of all this stuff doesn't mean AI is going to go away. So how do we best use the tools that are there that the students are using to teach what we want? And as I said, it might be different and look differently in different disciplines how you do that as we're incorporating these tools. But I certainly would hope that students are still being learned how to analyze and how to critically think and how to do all that stuff in this new environment. I mean, one thing to think about, and it's not an exact example, but I think there's something about it. Math professors were absolutely horrified when calculators came out. They thought that students would never learn how to do math anymore once calculators happened. Well, they incorporated calculators into math courses, and students still have to learn how to do math to use those calculators properly. And I think if you're still going to write effectively, you're still going to have some skills and knowledge, even with the AI tools. But again, I can't answer all those philosophical questions, but I'm going to argue that indeed this stuff is still important. We got to figure out a way to teach it, despite what's actually going on in the world.
I'll answer with in light of Tammy's additional question as well. Until such time the university system is transformed to a prompt in the discipline model, are there any tips you can give us for designing writing assignments that discourage or prevent the use of Gen AI tools? You should see on screen right now one such assignment I designed that I'd encourage people to do your own version of.
Can you make it bigger? You've got 2 or 3 screens open again.
You bet.
You know I'm going to give you a hard time.
I would be very lonely without you doing that, Tammy. All right. There we go. So I'm happy to share this later with anybody that's curious, but it's just one of many such possibilities. I had students grade AI. As for this particular assignment, and this is not a replacement for doing their own writing by any means, but one assignment as part of a whole course, I had them, we prompted a large language model together to do an essay. And then I had them take its output and write an essay in response as if they were me grading a student submission. They had to note, annotate it in the margins and then write a kind of essay response to the hypothetical student. And the idea was to make, move into a kind of metacognitive mode where they were really critiquing AI as much as they were utilizing it. And what I found, at least in this particular course, which I will fully grant, I have the massive advantage of having a relatively small group, just 11 students. It's not a large class, and that certainly affects what's possible. But what I found is that, if anything, the students have been more hypercritical of Gen AI than me. They've been incredibly, like, they have leaned towards being more negative toward it and more frustrated with the idea that this is somehow sufficient thinking or writing. Now, these are upper level and also humanities. Actually, no, they're about half social sciences majors as well, but they are liberal arts and sciences majors for the most part. And I hear, in Amy's question and in a lot of the conversations that happen around this, just this frustration with that's real and that I share with not understanding that being a wordsmith, truly mastering and serving language well in our society and thinking at its depths with words is just as valid and as difficult and as involved in rigorous a process as analyzing any spreadsheet and manipulating numbers. And we do live in a very STEM privileging society. Nothing wrong with the sciences. I am deeply enthusiastic about them. And at the same time, we undervalue the work that's involved in discovering something through pushing it through time after time of revision and better understanding ourselves and others through that process. So I just want to affirm that instinct and the need to continue to teach that and model it for our students, even as I do think that Michael's right, that we're sending them into a capitalistic system that is looking for every advantage profit-wise and thinks that AI is providing that. And what we have to help them to do, I think, is bring that tool and an understanding of it into conversation with a breadth of knowledge and a capacity for digging deep that makes them capable of doing much more than just, outsourcing.
And I am just filling our chat here with some useful tools. As you all are aware, I am the Writing Center director, and also digital technologies and writing is my area. So I have been following what my field has been putting out there for writing and things that might be helpful for folks as you're all thinking through, what does this look like in my discipline specifically, whether you're teaching in a bio WID class or communications, whatever your field might be. So the first one that I threw in the chat is Text Gen Ed, which is an open access book And they are actively updating this. Each semester, there are calls for new prompts to go out. So if you're looking for ideas for ways that you might get started coming up with some prompts that could, work with AI or ethical considerations, they break it down into those categories as well. Text Gen Ed is really useful. And then the MLAC's Joint Task Force on Writing and AI, they just came out with their second working paper, which I haven't had time to dig into because it just dropped a couple weeks ago. But that goes into coming up with policies and that kind of creation as well. And I saw that David Johnson just posted an AI in writing. Yes, more things from coming up with kind of academic integrity and assignment design, which I know is, one of the biggest concerns if you're teaching a WID course, whether you're doing in person or online, as many of you might have, an asynchronous WID course and are dealing with, well, how do I look at academic integrity when my students can just plug something into a machine and it's an asynchronous course, so I don't really know their voice. So those are just a couple of tools. I have a fun spreadsheet, and we can always chat if you're interested in kind of going through what some policies might be as you're putting together materials. Other questions or comments? Oh, my fun spreadsheet. Alon, you don't want to see it. It's a hot nightmare. All of the kind of tracking that I started doing for AI resources. But I will say there is a less frightening spreadsheet that my Writing Center consultants have been creating this semester. So in the Writing Center this semester, we're working on a project on AI and integrating it into the Writing Center. So you can expect to see from us after the semester is over, AI guidelines for the Writing Center specifically, and how we will or will not be implementing it during tutoring practices. And so I'll share some clean versions that my consultants have put together that have some articles from writing studies, because that's where I am, about benefits and the dangers, as we saw the bias that Everett was talking about as well is a really big thing. Other questions, folks in the chat, or you can unmute yourself.
I just have a quick question. So I was curious about AI in my WID courses for research. I mean, there's Google Scholar and that sort of thing, but I'm just curious, is there something with AI that could be incorporated to help my students with their research? Because I have a real difficult time with that, getting into the library. And so I'm just kind of curious.
I guess I'm not quite sure what you're asking. I mean, there are some tools that actually access Google Scholar from the AI. They actually pull on Google Scholar articles when they're writing it. Is that, you're talking about getting databases from the library?
I'm thinking about primary and secondary sources.
You would, it depends. The AI now have access to the internet, many of the AI tools, and they can actually go to primary source sites and incorporate that stuff. And you can also upload the primary source documents directly into the AI and have it look at them. If you wanted to include that in your analysis or something that you're writing with, you could go to the library databases and you could get articles from library databases and upload them into the AI, like I did for the assignment I showed at the beginning. I downloaded that from a JSTOR repository to get that article and include it in the assignment when I wrote it. I actually used a scholarly resource with the AI using the scholarly resource. So I mean, there are tools for accessing and bringing those scholarly resources directly with the AI. If you want to use AI with scholarly resources, yes, you can do that.
Can I jump in here and just ask, Greg, tell me a course that you'd like to have students potentially get more scholarly resources on.
Okay, so I teach Illinois history, and there's a major research project they have to do, and I'm always dealing with students who have a very difficult time coming up with a research topic, and then when they come up with that topic, then finding the necessary primary and secondary materials they would need to construct their research paper. So I can give them all kinds of ideas, and I have books and on reserve and circulation at the circulation desk, a variety of things like that. But I think students are so keen on just going on the computer to look for stuff that I'm just trying to figure out, well, is there something I can do to accommodate them that would help them do better research? Because sometimes they just seem really stymied when I can easily find stuff myself using the web page of the library and the different databases, but I can explain that in workshops and stuff like that. But it's like it doesn't seem to resonate, and I think it's just because they are so used to just going through their computer to try to find things, finding information.
Are these undergrads?
It's a combination of undergrads and grads, but the undergrads are the ones who have the biggest issue. And it's my WID course that
Okay.
it's a G on it, so grads can take it, but the undergrads are the ones who usually have the biggest issue.
Let's just try this. I just translated that into a simple prompt for Claude, hitting return, and let's just see how it does and what are its strengths and limitations in what it finds. So I asked it for links, and it doesn't look like it's providing that, but I said, hey, how about 10 really strongly recommended sources as primary texts, and then 10 secondary sources that that you'd recommend. And you're seeing here, some pretty legitimate materials that, many of which I recognize, authors I recognize. What are you seeing as you look at this output right here, Greg?
Well, these are a lot of familiar works for me too. Can you scroll
I'll go back to the top
so I can see
area.
the primary stuff?
There's the primary. I'll just make it a little bigger.
Right. So this is going to be difficult for them to figure out how to locate this information.
They would have to then say, grab that and throw it in a Google search to find it, right?
Right. They'd have to figure that out. And it also give a very general when I try to always work with students to have a topic that's not too general and not too narrow. So
Okay.
For example, a good example would be the Underground Railroad in Illinois. Could you do that prompt just to see what happens?
Yeah. So, do the same thing, but focus entirely on the Underground Railroad in the antebellum period in Illinois. Now, right now, the AI is kind of taking keywords here and and turning them into numeric data points. And it's essentially just looking for where are the overlaps in the data that I have that I've got access to. And what is that leading me to recommend given what seems most prominent out there?
Although you might get different results if this AI actually had web access itself, which some of them do, in which case it would interact with the algorithm with the internet while it was doing the calculations.
This one, you can maybe update me and us here, Michael. It's using essentially a copy of the web from with a certain delay, whereas some of them are using a real-time version of the web.
Right, they update their training data on a regular basis, so they're months behind. So you're not going to get current events and new stuff. However, some of them now they're not necessarily getting access. When we're talking about the training data, that's their database. But then they'll have their training data, which they use to generate. But then they'll also have access to the internet, where they can go out with the internet and put that in their algorithm when they're calculating the results. Excuse me. So they're still coming up with their predictions based on past text, but then they're combining that with the stuff that's actually on the internet and providing live links and able to provide up-to-date information for things that are going on. So it's a little bit different how the generative AI is working, because it's working in combination with its training database, like when it's static, but also using the live web at the same time, which then changes its results and the information that comes in. Obviously, if it could connect to the web, that makes it a little easier for students, because then those resources will come up, we'll know they exist because it will check that this resource is actually there, provide a link, and the student can go to it directly.
So the other thing that I added to the chat is if you want students to find specific sources around a topic, I have been using both Research Rabbit and Lit Maps with my students. So those are both AI kind of lit review finding machines is how I like to think about them. And so they both create graphics that show connections between sources. So if I search in Research Rabbit for food studies, it will populate a list of sources that gives me publisher information, journal titles, can be primary, secondary sources, things like that. And it'll actually help students create a web where they can see connections between sources. So it will show if one source has been cited by another source, and then you can expand the search to find similar sources there. So a tool like Research Rabbit, Lit Maps, and in addition to something like Claude or ChatGPT, those could be, you know, some tools that you might have students play with. My students in my cross-listed 400 level class played with Research Rabbit and Lit Maps to start finding things for their lit reviews. So we'll see what they thought in their end of semester reflections. So
I also still want to add, you can talk to a librarian. You know, I can help you with
Yes.
some archival stuff if you want to send a student over.
Please utilize those actual humans that we have over in Malpass. They can help you do those things that Research Rabbit does, you know, like finding similar sources.
Most of the
So-
stuff in the archives is not online, so you're still going to need to come over and get some help with it.
Yeah, we've got about, 2 minutes left. So I'll say we'll end kind of our conversation here. If you want to hang out and chat a little bit more, I'm happy to hang out with you. But I'll end our recording. And just so you know, this recording will be cleaned up a little bit and be circulated out through WID so that folks who couldn't be here can still kind of, hear what we had to say, and we can continue these conversations as, AI keeps evolving and we consider it for our classes. So thank you all for hanging out, and I'll just stop our recording now.